Hello and welcome back to a Stay Power episode with me, your host, Lindsay Clyde. Today we're talking about something that blew my mind last year. I went to Time Out for Women and heard a phrase by Anthony Sweat, and I don't know if he came up with this or if he found it from somewhere else, but he's where I found it. And he said, "The church is not true, it is authorized." So let's think about this. And this blew my mind. And the more that I think about it and the more that I hear the statement, the church is true, the more I realize, no, we want to say the church is authorized. First off, saying the church is true, and let me put a caveat here. I have said this many times. Growing up in my testimonies, recently, maybe even on this podcast, I might have said the church is true. So I'm not disparaging anybody who uses this phrase, but let's break it down and see what's really going on here with this phrase and what are we actually trying to say. The church is true. That statement doesn't actually really make sense in our language. What are we talking about when we say the church is true? Are we saying the church, the building, the organization? And what do we mean by true? Do we mean it's honest, it's just, it's right? The church is accurate or exact? The church, what are we talking about? The church, the organization, the people, the members, the restoration of it. We're not being very direct when we say this phrase, the church is true. And I know, again, I've said it before and I've heard so many people that I love and cherish say it before as well. So we don't want to be those people who suddenly go out and start to correct everybody with saying, don't say the church is true. But I want to just open our eyes here and maybe give us some other things to think about, other ways to state the thing that we're trying to actually say. And I think this is important because people are leaving because of false ideas about what the church is. They've heard the church is true their whole lives. And then when they hear about the bumps and the messy parts of the gospel and even mistakes or perceived mistakes or real mistakes that leaders or members have made, the church is true suddenly doesn't sound like a true statement to them anymore. And testimonies start to die when what they think they know about the gospel starts to crumble. So the church as an organization isn't perfect. The leaders called by God in this church are not perfect either. No one has ever promised that. Maybe by saying the church is true, we've started to think that, but that's not the case. The real thing that we need to drive home is what Anthony Sweat has said. He's an author and an artist in our church. He says the church is authorized, and so are its leaders. And we'll get into what does authorized mean in a little bit. But because we want it to be true, we want the church to be perfect, we want the organization to be perfect, I think that's why we keep saying things like that. We want to have this trust, saying that we trust this organization that we have joined. We know that it's led by God. But when we say the church is true, that's not exactly what we're saying. We want to be able to trust it. But I want to ask you, can we trust the church organization even if it isn't perfect? I'd like to also ask, where else do we put our trust in imperfect organizations? Some that came to my mind were the government. I'm in the U.S. Our government is not perfect. Our laws, our legal systems are not without problems and flaws. Some caused by the people who are trying to live the laws and some caused by the people who are trying to enforce the laws. But still, our society functions because we all just kind of place our trust in, yes, when this works, it works well and it does a good job. And so I've thought about the government and our laws. I thought about families. Families are imperfect organizations that we put our trust in. Fathers and mothers everywhere will freely admit to you that they are not perfect, and the way that they try to raise their family might evolve over time. It is an incredible responsibility to be parents of a family. To be a good parent, you will have to strive. You will have to make mistakes, but God says, try again, be more. Your responsibility to those little ones he gave to you is still intact. You must never give up. You must always try your best. And he says, I still authorize you to be the source of love and learning, even when you don't do everything correctly. And that does not diminish your role or your responsibility when you make mistakes. It's the same in the church. And also, children trust that their parents have their best interests at heart. And good parents do. Despite their mistakes or shortcomings, the church organization is a good parent. and it's been morphing and molding since the day it was restored by the imperfect but authorized people who restored the gospel here on the earth. They didn't do it all perfectly, but they did do it with authority. So God honors the hard work and diligence of faithful, authorized men and women. God allows us to make mistakes. He allows us in our organizations, in our families, in our governments, in our day-to-day living, in our church to make mistakes. He wants us to utilize the atonement of his son to make something more out of our mistakes and to grow and to learn. He allows hurt so that we can learn and grow. This is the God we worship. He values our learning and our growth and our journey over everything else. That's why we have our agency. That's why the plan has to work the way it does. He values those things more than he values his church organization being perfect. And we want it to be perfect, and actually someday it will be. When Jesus Christ comes back to the earth and reigns personally here on the earth, it will be perfect. But the authority that is found in the church is not to be equated with perfection. That happens after Christ comes again. And he authorizes this Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and its leaders to administer his power through proper channels because he is a God of order. He allows mistakes and authorizes the pressing forward despite those mistakes. So don't be discouraged to find out about the blemishes that you find in the church organization. The church has pimples and you've got pimples too. Maybe even warts or diseases that need to be taken care of. That doesn't diminish its authority. And let's not tell our children that the church or its members are perfect, even in slight or subtle ways, because we're not. It's not. But we are authorized. We are a covenant people who have made real and binding promises that give us the power of God to work for the salvation of men here on the earth. That is real. That is true. So instead of saying the church is true, here are some phrases we could maybe use instead that might get what we're really trying to say across to the people who are listening to our testimonies. We could say, this church is Jesus's church. This church is authorized to be the organization by which we are given priesthood power and make covenants. This church has the truth of Christ's restored gospel. Christ restored his true gospel through this church. The Book of Mormon is a book written by real people who actually lived on the earth and was truly translated and brought forth by the power of God. The priesthood power is real. The covenants we make in temples are real. The prophets in this church are authorized to make decisions and to give counsel to the people of the church and of the world. So to end this is something that I've really been trying to work on myself. What do I actually mean? How do I want my phrasing to come across? And how can I build up people's testimonies in the real gritty rawness of what the church organization actually is and what it can offer us? This is what I've really been trying to work on. But I want to end with this scripture, which is just a beautiful scripture and empowering too. So we are in Doctrine and Covenants 1:15, and we'll do verses 3 through 5. He's talking to his servants. He says, and also unto you, my servant, this is 2, and also unto you, my servant, Edward Partridge, and his counselors, and also, here's 3, and also unto my faithful servants who are of the high council of my church in Zion. For thus it shall be called, and unto all the elders and people of my church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, scattered abroad in all the world, for thus shall my church be called in the last days, even the church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Verily I say unto you all, arise and shine forth, that thy light may be a standard for the nations. Big responsibilities. When we are part of the authorized church of Jesus Christ, we have big responsibilities. Shine forth. And I think one of the ways we can shine forth is being more exact in our words and saying what we truly mean and helping others come to know of the truthfulness of the restored gospel and the authorization of the church organization that we find in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. All right, if you love this episode, would you share it with a friend? Thank you guys so much for being here. And again, thank you for staying with us. The Why I Stay podcast is a faith-based podcast exploring the lives and experiences of members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This podcast is not produced or endorsed by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but we do love that church. All rights reserved. And a great big shout out to Fast Sounds from Pixabay for the amazing and jammin' intro-outro music. Thanks, guys.